I suspect there are a lot of other school districts that don't have anywhere near the kind of comprehensive program that you do. Again, part of it due to size, but it would be interesting to know what the need is out there. And I also appreciate the need to try to prevent the problem from occurring and the need for better educational opportunities for young women and men on issues how to avoid unintended teen pregnancy. Are there any other questions? Senator Wieckowski.
I had a question for the ACLU. One of your general state recommendations was to restore state funding for adolescent health programs and to straighten requirements regarding sex education to ensure students have knowledge. I know there's a lot of parents for religious reasons or whatever that pull their kids out. In fact, it's probably the students that need the sex education. Can you put some meat on those bones as far as what the recommendation is when we have that conflict between the parents' prerogative, I'll call it?
We actually work really closely with CLRJ on issues of comprehensive sex education, so I'll actually let Marisol take the question.
Actually, the majority of parents support comprehensive education being taught in schools. It's like over 80%, it's close to 80%. I don't have the exact number, but I can get that information to you. And there is an opt-out as well, but in terms of strengthening,
school districts have to have this. They have to give quality. You know, it's an enhanced program too. They can't just say we're having sex education, sit here and read the Bible or whatever one wants to do. No. They have to give another whole training on something else. I mean, it's
so. Actually, sex education is optional to be taught in schools. However, about 97%. Over 96% of school districts do choose to teach it. And once they choose to teach it, then there is a set of criteria that it has to be medically accurate, it has to be unbiased, it has to be of equal access to English language learners. And so there's a whole set of criteria in the education code. There is HIV education that also has to be, then that is required to be taught. So we think that those two things obviously go together and should be taught combined.
I guess the question that I had is that if the programs are inadequate because we have unintended pregnancies, okay, I get that there's an improvement, but the people that opt out, how would we strengthen should we change the law, suggestion that you can't opt out or make it more difficult? You just can't decide that I don't want my child to be educated about sex education and we're victims of unintended pregnancies? Or do you have anything? I'll read the report. I guess it's in there.
Sorry.
From the ACLU wanted to answer the question. So very few families actually.
Excuse me, so you can be heard. Will you just come up here, and then we're going to move on to the next panel if we could. No, that's all right. Go ahead.
So Philip Burlingame, Reproductive Justice Policy Director at the ACLU. I just wanted to let you know that very few families actually opt their children out. It's less than 5%. As Marisol was saying, the vast majority of families do want their children to receive the education. And so while there are some vocal opponents, it's actually a very, very small sliver of the population that withdraws their student from the instruction. So I just wanted to let you know that very small number. Thank you.
You all set? Thank you very much. Really appreciate this. And obviously we need the data, and I'd love to see your program become a template. Of course, it does require funding. We have a challenge, frankly, with LCFF. We've sort of taken away a lot of the mandates, and I know the program dealing with pregnancy and teen parents is one of those programs that is challenged as a result of sort of removing some of those mandates. And if you have for us going forward some suggestions, again, the carrot and the stick approach, what we might do to encourage school districts to be more responsive in this area. If you'd give that some thought, I think that would help us all. So thank you very much again for coming. And we have two more individuals and a little public comment period. Kate Carpolo, who is the executive director of the California Center for Research on Women and Families, was supposed to be here. The legislation that I carried last year on just getting some numbers so we could really address these issues in a more concrete fashion really came from the work that she had done and her commitment with her organization to Title IX. She is sick today. And we have Kim Turner from the Fair Play for Girls in Sports, who was with us a little earlier, the staff attorney who is going to appear in her stead, along with Linda Dedeker, is it? Did I pronounce it right? Dedeker Yolo, with the Association of American University Women, the Napa County branch, are going to talk with us about future actions and solutions. So let's start with Ms. Turner. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks very much, Senator Jackson. Yes, as you note, I am standing in for Kate Carpolo, Executive Director of the California Center for Research on Women and Families, CCRWF, who has the flu today, unfortunately. My name is Kim Turner, staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society Employment Law Center, Fair Play for Girls in Sports Project, and we are a member of the Title IX Coalition. Given we are short on time, I will be brief, and as a former college athlete, I'm very responsive to the game clock.
I was a tennis player, so we didn't have a game clock, so that's my problem, and I apologize.
No problem. I played volleyball without the clock and soccer with the clock, so I know both ways. So in my brief remarks, I'm going to outline the history and purpose of the Title IX Coalition, and then share a couple of recommendations for future actions, responding to your comment, Senator Jackson, for what can we do next. The California Title IX Coalition was formed in 2013 to support increased implementation of this landmark law and to assist students, parents, teachers, administrators, and school board members to open up doors and opportunities for girls and young women. In a nutshell, our motivating theory was that there is, in fact, a willingness to implement, but not always a clear path, not enough materials, tools, templates, and checklists to help the thousands of schools and districts to implement the complicated law. That's why the Title IX Coalition was convened at CCRWF, which brought together 4 organizations with a history and commitment to advocacy on Title IX: Legal Aid Society Employment Law Center, my organization, the California Women's Law Center, based in Southern California, Equal Rights Advocates, and the American Association of University Women of California, AAUW. Our approach as a Title IX Coalition was to develop a technical assistance tool, the Title IX checklist, 14 questions to ask and act on, available at CCRWF's webpage. It's the yellow handout that the members, I hope, received. And the checklist includes 4 modules about Title IX coordinators, athletics, sexual harassment, and pregnant and parenting teens, the very things we've been discussing today. The checklist was presented at the 2014 Women's Policy Summit with a call for volunteers to help us beta test the instrument in their own communities, at their own schools. 9 community teams, also referred to as respondents in our subsequent report, volunteered to use the checklist to evaluate whether or not their high schools, although we know that Title IX applies to K through 12, but their high schools in this case were meeting the legal responsibilities under Title IX. Now, we are releasing the executive summary of this effort today. It's the blue report that you have in front of you. And this also presents this report, the coalition's recommendations for next steps, which are in the green sheet. So we really tried to boil this down as to what we can do next. In these overarching top 5 recommendations that I will present today, all focused on actions needing to increase implementation on Title IX in California's K-12 system, we are trying to recommend a way forward. Number 1, statewide responsibility for implementation of Title IX. To provide local school districts the knowledge and tools to implement Title IX, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction and the California School Boards Association should collaborate to offer biannual trainings, model policies, templates for communications, and other best practices. I just want to stress, given what we've heard today, the provision of knowledge and tools has to be comprehensive and sustained, not a flash-in-the-pan effort. 21st century tools such as webinars for mass trainings can be utilized, for example, in a cost-efficient way to educate everybody about how Title IX should work. Now, in terms of local responsibility for implementation of Title IX, number 2 on our 5 recommendations list, the superintendent in every school district throughout the state should ensure prior to the start of each school year that a Title IX coordinator is identified and trained, and clarify if the coordinator's responsibilities are district-wide or if they will be working with the Title IX coordinators at each school site. Superintendents should require schools to prominently post on their websites contact information for their Title IX coordinators, not buried at the bottom of a whole bunch of web pages as we have seen in past years. And also provide contact information in biannual notices to administrators, teachers, staff, students, and parents. Number 3, each local school board should hold an annual meeting to evaluate the status of Title IX implementation for their district using the Title IX compliance checklist, which we have in the yellow, which is also available on CCRWF's webpage, or other systematic evaluation instruments. The focus of the local evaluation should be data-based and action-oriented, providing an opportunity for these school board members to assess compliance and set objectives for implementation. At minimum, the evaluation should focus on the Title IX coordinator, athletics, harassment issues, pregnant and parenting teens. I will note briefly, in our efforts at Fair Play to engender compliance among schools, we too often find that the coordinators are not fully aware of the correct legal standards, and thus organizations like my own and the other coalition partners are available to help schools to ensure that those standards are correct and that they're being shared in the proper fashion, because we of course don't want to share the wrong information about Title IX. And then 4th, superintendents and local school boards should ensure that schools offer optimal training of administrators, staff, teachers, and parents, as well as teens, to ensure that they're notified of the school's Title IX policies, practices, and complaint procedures. I also want to note quickly that retaliation was mentioned earlier today. A lot of folks don't understand that Title IX prohibits retaliation, and it is a Title IX violation to retaliate against a student for having complained about a gender inequity, whether it be in terms of athletics or harassment or pregnant and parenting teen issues. Responsibility for oversight, finally, number 5, the California Legislative Women's Caucus, in partnership with the Education and Judicial Committees in both the State Senate and State Assembly, should hold an annual oversight hearing, just like this wonderful hearing today, to ensure that the California Superintendent of Public Instruction and the local school districts are moving forward to implement Title IX. And finally, we want to thank Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, who spearheaded SB 1349, which will shine a light on Title IX issues at schools around the state in 2015-16 when the bill starts being implemented. And we just want to thank her for her tremendous support for our Title IX and for our coalition. And we hope that it will lead to greater compliance, knowledge, and enforcement. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the shout out, but for all of us who participated in sports, this is kind of a no-brainer, and certainly for our daughters and granddaughters and sisters and even mothers, this is, I think, very important work.
As the mother of a 10-month-old, I completely agree with you. 10-month-old daughter.
You bet. Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, our last speaker at this point, last but certainly not least, with the American Association of University Women, is Linda Dedeker-Yolo. Welcome.
Thanks, and thanks for having this hearing. I'm co-chair of the Public Policy Committee of the Napa branch of the American Association of University Women, and we conducted a Title IX assessment of 5 high schools in the Napa County. And the administrators and teachers were very generous in giving their time for this. Suggestions for future action that would benefit schools in their attempts to comply include, number 1, to increase funding for Train the Trainer grants under the California Ed Code, Article 4, Sex Equity in Education Act, Section 224.5, to allow all school districts to improve the quality of their training in Title IX compliance. This will provide, according to the California Ed Code, for, quote, ongoing gender training to all staff members, including certificated and classified staff, and maintaining a pool of knowledgeable gender equity trainers. Number 2, encourage schools throughout the state to share best practices, including identifying resources and contacts regarding Title IX compliance. This would include gender equity training, increasing the participation of girls in athletics, sexual harassment prevention training, and accommodations for pregnant teens to improve their high school graduation rates and preparation for college and careers. For example, one of our schools, Valley Oak, reviews the sexual harassment policy with their students at the beginning of each year In addition, someone from News, a local nonprofit, Napa Emergency Women's Services, comes to the school and spends an hour in each classroom discussing sexual harassment as well as domestic abuse, boyfriend, girlfriend. They focus on behavior that shows respect and responsibility. It covers social media as well. And lastly, all the required trainings and reporting to promote gender equity and Title IX compliance, including what is required by CFF, should be coordinated in such a way to ensure that the process is simple, straightforward, and not redundant, so as not to put undue burden on the teachers. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No. If you would provide us with a copy of those suggestions, and I feel a bill coming on. And also a need to find some funding. There's got to be a way to do better in this. We have an opportunity for public comment, and if we could have the Office of Consumer Rights, Civil Rights come back, if there's anyone who wishes to speak, get ready to come up. Could you give us an answer on why, what the impediments are? You heard the situation with Berkeley. I don't know if you're still investigating and thus cannot speak to that issue, but you mentioned that in all the years you've been with the Office of Civil Rights, there have been maybe 2 instances and only one where there was even the threat of pulling federal funds. Could you tell us what the challenge is there?
Sure. Let me speak to the Berkeley situation just briefly.
And I do want to indicate, just FYI, that we did offer the Berkeley schools to come and speak today, and for whatever their reasons are, they declined, but I just wanted it to be clear that we did give them that opportunity. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sure. Just really briefly, the complaint involving the counselor is aware of but not familiar with. That was handled a few years ago and involved only that individual situation. In those days, unlike now, OCR was not doing as many systemic investigations and getting systemic remedies as we are now. But while I can't comment on it, we actually do have a current complaint investigation involving Berkeley High School on the issues that were discussed, and we've just begun that investigation. So hopefully that's something we will be able to pursue aggressively. I can't talk too much more about it.
As a Judiciary Committee, we do, I think, understand those limitations, so thank you.
There might be some other folks in the audience who are also familiar with it, and if they want to comment. Ironically, it's sort of a double-edged comment in a sense about the only 2 enforcement proceedings. The point it was related to earlier is that virtually every recipient, school district, and college that we make findings against or raise concerns with are willing to volunteer. So, willing to voluntarily resolve the case, and that's the primary reason for the lack of enforcement. But, there are some instances where arguably the case could have been pushed farther, and it relates to resources and all kinds of other considerations.
And I think we all agree the goal is compliance.
Yes.
It's not litigation. But if we can't get people to comply, there have to be some hammers there, or else nothing will happen. So
Right.
Thank you.
And generally, we are able to obtain compliance.
Great. Thank you. Public comment time. Yes, if you tell us your name and limit it, if you could, to just a couple minutes at the most.
Happy to do it. My name is Heidi Goldstein. I'm a parent advisor to BHS Stop Harassing. I'm also a parent of 2 students at Berkeley High School. I'm the one who filed the complaint with OCR that Gail is mentioning. And it was intended exactly for the reasons you stated. We needed a bigger hammer. There are other complaints that are actually on file with the district. They don't do a good job of walking their talk with respect to the uniform complaint process, meeting the deadlines, or really addressing the issues. That was the motivation to file the complaint. Second item, you talked a little bit earlier about incentivizing districts, and that's a hard question. So what I have is more of an observation. And the observation is that you can spend the money on lawsuits or CYA activities, or you can spend the money on training. And there's got to be an incentive in there somewhere in terms of the measurements that school districts do about what they spend on each.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Next public speaker.
My name is Christina Martinez, and I'm a teacher with Sacramento City Unified School District, and also a mother of 4 and a founder of No Teen Shame, which is a group that seeks to improve strategic messaging campaigns surrounding teenage pregnancy prevention and pregnant and parenting youth. And I was just here to briefly share my experience as a pregnant and parenting youth in the Sacramento City Unified School District. I had much of the experience that was talked about by the panelists. Found out that I was pregnant when I was a sophomore at John F. Kennedy High School here in Sacramento, and knew that I needed to look into options as far as continuing high school and going on to college so that I could support my new family. However, that proved to be difficult, and at the time there were options available. There was a continuation high school, there was a program at Hiram Johnson, and it's worth noting that both have since been shut down. So within Sacramento City Unified, which is the 11th largest district in California, serving, I believe, 42,000 students, there's currently nothing serving pregnant and parenting youth. There was also another program which I tried for a while, but it required me getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and taking a bus for an hour, and it just didn't work out. So what I ended up doing was trying to catch up on some units in summer school, and that was a tragic experience because I got really sick with morning sickness and required hospitalization for a week. And at that time, my mom went to the school to act on my behalf to see if I could make up work. We knew that I was going to be hospitalized for a couple days, and the teacher and administrator told her that, sorry, we're going to have to drop her from summer school. So they dropped me from summer school, but not only that, I found out later from several students that the teacher then went back to the class and told the entire class that the reason that I was dropped was because I was pregnant. Mind you, I was only 3 months pregnant at the time. I hadn't told anybody. So that was how it was announced to my peers on behalf of this teacher. And it wasn't until I started advocacy work for young parents that I found out about Title IX and was blown away that I even had rights in that area. I think I was like 30 at the time when I found out. So that is just why I'm here today, to thank you for paying attention to this very important issue. I believe that the more we support pregnant and parenting youth, the better the outcome for the children. So my son now is about to be 18 years old. He's a student at John F. Kennedy High School, 4.4 GPA, very proud. And he's about to graduate. He's applied to colleges all up and down California. And I think that because I was able to kind of go through the works and finish my education, it helped me to school him through his education, and I would just really like to see more support for this marginalized population.
Thank you very much. Rather compelling story. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, and I really thank you for having what is an extremely not only important, but very informative conversation. I've been working on, my name is Karen Humphrey.
Thank you, Karen.
I'm, until recently, a state employee. I actually worked on Title IX and gender equity at the Department of Education, and also worked on gender issues for the California Post-Secondary Education Commission. We have a report that was published in 2004 on athletics across the board that I will share with your staff, because it says some of the same things. For the 20 years that I've been involved in this topic, I'm still appalled at the levels of ignorance and some of the really sad stories we've heard here today. Also heartened by the fact that people really understand what some of the solutions are. And clearly, not just professional development for administrators and teachers is a huge under-addressed issue in California schools right now anyhow. This is a very important part. Equity training, not just on what the rules say and what the law is, but on how to provide more equitable education is an urgent need, and it's going to take a need for, I believe, dedicated funds that have to be there. And I understand that in the current environment that's not easy, but certainly we need to look at finding ways to incentivize that. The other issue is that if we had more data that could really more clearly quantify and explain what the problems are right now, then people might understand that we haven't really achieved equity, and here are specific areas you could address if you had the appropriate data to support that. Again, that 2004 report will provide some help, but it would need to be updated in terms of numbers. The role of coordinators is extremely important, and I would point to the work of the Feminist Majority Foundation at the national level, and they're very interested in being involved at the state level, has done some outstanding work in identifying how Title IX coordination could be strengthened, how you could create teams across school districts. LAUSD clearly has a very good model for this, but a lot of other school districts could be doing something on a smaller scale. And the importance of the Title IX coordinator as an equity leader, not as a, pound the fists and beat up on schools, but as a way of helping schools to achieve the equity compliance that I believe that most really want to do is important. So I'm going to be offering some suggestions in writing over time and sharing the work of FMF and others to do some of this strength. I was thinking about what kind of compliance would work. I don't know that OCR will ever remove funding from school districts because it's been a very difficult thing to do. That hurts schools, that hurts students. One of the reluctance of the part of the federal government to take away money is that it just hurts the kids that need the money. So I really think that we're going to have to find some other, to the extent we need a hammer, that we can't incentivize and support teachers with training and understanding to do this. I think embarrassment might be a good thing. It seems to me that if we could get more media coverage of school districts that really do fail their students, that might be helpful. But I really think our idea should be to build, not just compliance, but to build an equitable environment in every school, not because they have to do it, but because they want to do it and they have the tools to do it, and that hitting districts with a hammer should be our very last resort. And certainly it's a far more expensive way to do it. So I encourage your continued work on this, and I am glad to help volunteer in any way I can. I'm in Sacramento, so I'm certainly glad to be of support in any way, and I thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for all of your good work, and certainly the fact that you've been with the Department of Education maybe can give us some insights and suggestions. I know everybody's going to say the same thing, we need more money. That may be true, it may not be true, but certainly we need more compliance, so we'll have to work to try to figure that out. Thank you.
So my name is Rebecca Levinson, and I'm one of the other parent advisors to Berkeley Stop Harassing, but I'm going to speak to you from a different hat. So in my professional life, I was a senior policy analyst at Futures Without Violence for 14 years, and I continue to consult with them. So I've been working on the issue of violence against women and girls and others for my entire career. And one of the things that has come up a number of times, and I wanted to ask you all to just take a moment to consider, is the issue of training. And, one of the things that we've experienced in Berkeley, working directly with administration, is that training can be everything from a memo that's 3 lines long, and that allows them to check a compliance box. They talk about training that is age appropriate for that level of student. And I really want to push us in California to think differently. I think we have an opportunity here to really think about evidence-based programming, and looking at curricula makes a difference. That's been shown to help some of the highest risk kids who come from marginalized homes. These are the same kids that we're interested in preventing from going on to prison and dropping out of high school in the first place. I think that there are a number of evidence-based programs that we could think about bringing in and tying into the story. So for example, the state of Alaska has implemented the 4th R. It comes out of Canada. It's reading, writing, arithmetic, and relationships. And it looks at what is a healthy and safe relationship. How do these pieces fit together? The federal government, CDC, has a number of evidence-based programming, including Green Dot, which is an upstander education program that's phenomenal. And these are things that we could do. This is low-hanging fruit. So we pay for these folks to come out and do a statewide training. I think that could really make a difference. And speaking to the athletic piece of this, there's also an evidence-based program called Coaching Boys into Men that really helps make a difference in terms of changing boys' knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs around the way they treat girls and women, and they can start that at a young age. And who do you pay attention to the most when you're a young boy, right? You pay attention to your coach. That's, it's as important as a teacher or a parent. And so these are examples of things that work. And I think, in the same way we wouldn't want someone sort of creating what would be a good, chemistry curriculum that includes some of this and some of that and some of the other thing without knowing that it actually taught a kid chemistry. How in the world would we want to proceed in this vein without creating programming that really makes a difference? And I think this is our moment to think about this. The last thing I want to say on this front is that, you know, because I've worked in the area of reproductive health and unintended pregnancy, connected to violence against women, you know, some of the moms, not all of them, but some of the moms who experience pregnancy have experienced that at the hands of an abusive partner. And I think that that's another piece of this, that when we think about programming that's in the big picture of all of the elements that are connecting people's lives, that we hold on to these pieces. I really want to thank you again for your time and caring enough to hear our words today.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I reminded there's a fellow named Jackson Katz. I don't know if you know who he is. He did a TED Talk, and I've heard him speak, and he's written a book that tries to address violence from the perspective of the male model and how we model our young men. And I was struck also by the statement that the young woman here from Berkeley High. I mean, part of this whole problem is what the desperation of boys to trying to fit into what they perceive to be the mold of being a man. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could give them a different alternative view of it other than being abusive and violent and what have you. So much appreciated. And again, lots of good information. And I see here we have another young lady who would like to speak. Tell us your name and...
Yeah, so hi, my name is Liana Thomason, and I am the youth who started BHS Stop Harassing, our group at school working to implement education, which is what we really believe is the means to ending sexual harassment. I wanted to say, I think you said this earlier, expressed surprise that of all schools it was Berkeley that is just so out of compliance, and a lot of people have said that when we tell them how it is, and I think that really just goes to show that no matter how progressive the area is, these values that have been, you know, so ingrained into everybody pervade. And when I look around for at my fellow peers, I am scared because we're going to go off to college, getting the education that we got around what consent is, what sexual harassment is, and I'm not comfortable with what we got. So I think that I just wanted to put in my 2 cents that I believe this education needs to start in kindergarten, teaching about the concepts of what consent is, what me versus you looks like, and really just changing the mindset of the young people coming up through schools.
Thank you. I couldn't agree with you more. I think those of us who have looked at this issue, and I was the author of the Yes Means Yes legislation with Senator De Leon, and when you get to college, we're educating on what consent means and doesn't mean. It was very clear that we really, when you start in college, you've sort of missed a good portion of the people, both boys and girls, before they become young men and young women. We're not addressing the issue at an early enough age. So I appreciate your comments and clear insights into that issue. Our last speaker.
This is going to be very quick.
Great.
I'm Alicia Hetman, retired from the California Department of Education, a member of AAUW. I've been involved with Title IX and equity for 40 years. I just want to say that I was hired by the Department of Ed as an expert on gender equity, working closely with Assemblywoman Jackie Spear and Sheila Kuehl to bring compliance into the review process for public K-12 schools. We did that successfully starting in the mid-90s. I do not believe that it's being implemented in the same way today. And your chief of staff has my contact information. I'll be happy to bring in what I used to do for compliance and what they're doing now so that you can see that we are taking 2 steps back for every step forward. Thank you all for having us today.
And thank you for your good work. I think that does it. Senator Wojciechowski, any final comments?
Thank you for holding this hearing and giving me an update and my staff on how our schools are complying. I look forward to working with you in this session.
Great. And I want to thank my staff, the Judiciary Committee staff, and my personal staff from the Women's Legislative Women's Caucus on this issue. This has been a passion of mine forever because as a young girl, I was pre-Title IX, and I did not have the opportunities that I should have had as a young female athlete who loved sports and still does to this day. I've seen what's happened since Title IX. I remember the first years of its implementation. When the Olympics came, we won more Olympic gold medals with our women athletes than our men, and I think that has stayed somewhat consistent as we see the opportunities in science and math and wonder where are the women, where are the girls. We have to work on that with our young pregnant teen mothers. Obviously, if we can prevent unintended pregnancies, that's the best approach, but to the extent that, for whatever reason, we do see young women having children before their time or before they want to, or maybe if they do want to, that's their choice. We have to provide opportunities for them too to be successful. So the work is, I can't say it's just begun, it's 40 years old, but we still have a lot to do. So I thank you all for being here, and let's go out there and make some good change. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.